Section G, America dooms Loyalist Spain. So we see between the years of 1936 to 1939, there's a civil war that breaks out in Spain. And we really see this as being important because it's kind of like a dress rehearsal for World War II. So what's happening is there's a group of Spanish rebels led by a fascist general, Francisco Franco. And he's rebelling against the democratic government that's already been established in Spain. So we'll see supporting the rebels, we'll see Hitler in Germany, we'll see Mussolini in Italy, and then kind of fighting for the Loyalist or the democratic government in Spain, we'll see the Soviet Union. Well, some Americans want to help out the Loyalist, so we have a group of about 3,000 Americans who volunteer to fight alongside the Loyalist in Spain, and this is called the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. Okay, so this was an unofficial group of Americans who volunteered to fight for the Loyalist. But Congress, being isolationist, places an arms embargo on both sides. So saying we're not going to supply either side, we're going to stay neutral in this deal. And, because America's sitting on the sidelines, it's really, really hurting the Loyalist. Because Franco, right, he's a fascist. So we see, like I mentioned before, Italy and Germany are supplying him heavily with weapons, while the Loyalists are just kind of sitting there, trying their best. So really what we see is America is so isolationist that they're willing to let a democratic nation like Spain kind of fall to a group of rebels. That's how much we did not want to get involved. Peace at any price. And the section kind of ends by reminding you that not only were we isolationists, we were neutral, but we were refusing to build up our defenses. So, other countries are building up their navies, building up their armies, and we're just sitting here, putting our hands over our ears, pretending we're not hearing anything, pretending we're in this little shell. So it won't be until 1 year before World War II breaks out that we actually start building up our defenses. So we're definitely in the little shell still. Okay, Section H, appeasing Japan and Germany. Okay, so we see in 1937, Japan invades China. They invade China at the Marco Polo Bridge near Beijing, and this is kind of called the curtain raiser of World War II, because now these dictators are just not building up within their countries. Now they're going to become aggressive towards other nations. So we see Japan invade China in 1937. FDR wanted the neutrality. FDR did not want the Neutrality Acts to take effect, because if he declared that to be an official war, the Neutrality Acts would click in. And the Neutrality Acts said that we couldn't supply either side with weapons. If they're the victims of their aggression or if they're aggressors, we didn't care. If they're at war, we're not going to supply them. So FDR, wanting to help out China, wanting to supply China, officially did not recognize this as war, so we could help them out. And what he does in response to this is he goes to Chicago in 1937 after the invasion, and he gives a very famous speech called the quarantine speech. Okay, so if you quarantine someone, that usually means they have like a contagious disease of something, right? So if somebody has chicken pox, you might quarantine them, not be around them for a while till they get better. So he gives this speech that's more or less saying we need to quarantine these aggressors in Italy and in Japan. We need to quarantine them to make sure their aggression doesn't spread. And even this little baby step away from neutrality just causes this outcry in America from the isolationists saying, okay, first we're going to quarantine them economically, and the next thing you're going to know, you're going to be drafting our boys, we're going to be planning our son's funerals. He did not expect the reaction. So just to this one speech in Chicago, there's such a big reaction that he really has to take a step back and, seek a less direct means to curb the dictators. So as an example of how isolationist we are at this time, we see that a United States merchant ship that's off the, in the Chinese waters, sort of speak, it is bombed by Japan and it sinks. It kills 2 Americans and 30 are wounded. And this is the Panay? Yeah, Panay. This boat, and what you might expect from Americans is being like, hey, Japan bombed our boat, we need business, we need war. Remember during the Spanish-American War, we thought Spain had attacked the battleship Maine, and we're all like, remember the Maine, the hell with Spain, remember the Maine, the hell with Spain. Well, now we see Japan attacking an unarmed U.S. merchant ship off the coast of China, and we're just like, oh, we really don't want to make a big deal out of this. And fortunately for us, Japan apologizes right away. Japan is willing to pay for the ship, pay some indemnity. So we're just kind of like, whew, good, because we didn't want to go with war. So we can see the switch, Spain, back in the Spanish-American War, Spain supposedly bombs one of our ships, and we're like, oh, we need to go to war with Spain. And then now we see Japan bomb another one of our ships, and we're like, can we pretend that didn't happen? Good. All right. So let's talk about Adolf Hitler, okay? So we're talking about the policy of appeasement. This is saying that if they make an aggressive move, we kind of make excuses for it. We don't react to it. We just really, really want peace. So we let the dictators really take a lot of ground, get away with a lot because we don't want any trouble. And we just saw that with Japan invading China, and now we're going to see that with Hitler, and he invades a lot of different countries. So let's talk about this. Okay, so Adolf Hitler flaunts the Treaty of Versailles, more or less forgets about the Treaty of Versailles, and he starts to rebuild his navy, rebuild his army. He starts to make military service compulsive or mandates it for young German men. And then his first aggressive move into other countries, he moves into the demilitarized zone called the Rhineland. Okay, the Rhineland is kind of a buffer zone, you could say, that separates part of France from part of Germany, because Germany and France are right next to each other. So the Rhineland was supposed to be demilitarized, saying, Germany, you cannot be in this. This is our buffer zone. So Germany is like, oh, Treaty of Versailles, never mind. So he actually goes into the Rhineland. So this is the first kind of aggressive step here. Then, this is actually when he starts to exterminate a lot of the Jewish population, and we'll see about 6 million people through the Holocaust are murdered, more or less. He starts building up his air force, and then in March of 1938, he takes another step forward, another aggressive act, and what he does is he starts to occupy Austria. Okay, so this is a bloodless occupation. So it's not like he's killing all the Austrians. He's occupying Austria, like, right, hashtag Sound of Music. All right, so he occupied the Rhineland. We really didn't do anything about that. Okay, he's occupying Austria. And France and Britain, they're really not doing anything about it. They're just hoping that Hitler, after he gets, Austria, will be satisfied, that he will stop occupying, will stop, would satisfy his passion for conquest. But Hitler is not done yet. Next step he takes is he invades the Sudetenland, which is a German-speaking area of the neighbor country of Czechoslovakia. Okay, so the Sudetenland is a part of we'll just call it Czechoslovakia. I can't say that word anyway. Sudetenland, German-speaking area of their neighbor. And what happens is this finally, the Allied powers, so to speak, says, you know what, Hitler, we need to talk about this. You took over the Rhineland, you took over Austria, now you're in the Sudetenland. Let's talk. So what happens is they hold a conference in Munich after he goes into the Sudetenland. More or less, the powers that be allow Hitler to take the Sudetenland, and in return, Hitler says, the Sudetenland is the last territorial claim I have to make in Europe. So it's more or less saying, Hitler, you're not supposed to be taking over other countries. And Hitler's like, I won't anymore. but can I keep the Sudetenland? And we're like, yeah, you can keep the Sudetenland. Just stop expanding, please. Stop, taking over other countries. The idea of appeasement, once again. However, 6 months later, we see Hitler kind of forgetting about his promise of stopping his expansion, and he actually doesn't take just the Sudetenland, but he takes all of Czechoslovakia. So that's kind of an issue, right? That's not a wonderful thing. Okay, section I, Hitler's belligerence and U.S. neutrality. So, people were hoping that Joseph Stalin from the Soviet Union would sign a mutual defense treaty with Britain, with France, kind of against Germany. But we actually see the opposite thing happening. What happens in August of 1939, the Soviet Union signs a non-aggression treaty with Germany, and this is called the Hitler-Stalin Pact. And this non-aggression treaty is exactly what it sounds like. The Soviet Union is promising not to be aggressive towards Germany, and Germany is promising not to be aggressive towards the Soviet Union. So more or less now Hitler is free to continue his conquest without fear of repercussions from the Soviet Union. Yikes. All right. And democracies across the world had hoped that Stalin would have been the person to stop Hitler. Anyway, so now we're getting close to war, now that this pact between the Soviet Union and Germany is signed. Okay, so now once this pact is signed, kind of the fruit of this is Hitler now feels comfortable overtaking Poland. This is a huge deal, okay? So once he invades Poland, this is the straw that breaks the camel's back, okay? After he invades Poland, we see France and Britain declare war on Germany. Okay, that's the last straw. So so Hitler invades Germany in 1939, and then Britain and France declare war. But so, it's too late for poor Poland. Poland fell to Nazi forces just 3 weeks after his invasion. So the 20 years of peace we've had between 1919 and 1939 is now gone. Okay, that 20 years of peace in between the two world wars, we see that go away when Germany invades Poland, and Britain and France declare war on Germany. All right. Okay. So how does Roosevelt respond to all of this? Well, in true American fashion, right? He reinstates the fact that the United States is neutral. We do not want to get involved. Americans were clearly, anti-Nazi, anti-Hitler, but we weren't going to be suckers again. We felt that World War I had been a mistake and that we were suckers for being sucked into the war. No pun intended. Okay. But some Americans wanted to be able to help out. They wanted to be able to, maybe we should supply them with some airplanes. Maybe we should supply them with other weapons. But the Neutrality Act of 1937 stated no. Now that France, now that Britain are belligerent nations, now they're at war, we're not supposed to help them. That was the Neutrality Act after all. So FDR calls Congress into a special session to maybe rethink this Neutrality Act. Maybe we can make an exception for France. Maybe we can make an exception for Britain. So what happens is Congress kind of changes their mind and they create a new Neutrality Act, kind of with this extra loophole. So the Neutrality Act of 1939 says that we could sell war materials on a cash and carry basis. So cash and carry, what does that mean? It means that we would not give any loans, but if France, for example, wanted to buy some of our warships, they would have to pay cash, and they would have to come up and pick up the goods. So we're not going to be involved in any of this, German U-boat warfare anymore. No, we don't want that. So if you want to trade with us, you have to pay in cash, no loans, and you have to come pick it up. We're not going to risk war with Germany shooting down any of our merchant ships anymore. So cash and carry. This was the new plan. It was a good thing for the American economy because once again, we have a war industry. We have a demand of wartime goods. So we really see the Depression kind of being left behind as we pick up our economy to supply goods for the Allied forces on a cash and carry basis, meaning they have to pay in cash and they have to come pick up their goods. Okay, section J, the fall of France. Oy vey. Okay, so Britain and France declared war, but they weren't actually ready yet for war. So what we have is a period of months that are called the phony war. Okay, because the idea is that France and Britain had declared war, but we really don't see any fighting for the first few months of the war because France and Britain are kind of scrambling to, you know, get their armies built up to get everything ready for war. Yes. Okay, so that phony war ends in April of 1940 when Hitler overruns Denmark and Norway. And then he goes on and, you know, the next month he overruns the Netherlands and Belgium. So Hitler is on the run. And we see France is in a precarious location because France is actually in the continent. So we have underneath France, more or less, we have Mussolini, we have Italy, right? And then on the right of France, we have Germany. So France is being attacked from the south. France is being attacked from Germany on their east. And so we see France actually surrender in 1940, which is a big deal because now the only people really fighting against Hitler is Britain. So it's just Britain now versus Hitler. France has gone away. France has fallen. Fortunately, most of the British troops who were in France were able to be evacuated, so that's a good thing. And this is really the time we see really stepping up in leadership is the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. He is a wonderful orator, speaker, and he's really a person who helps keeps the British population calm during this very intense kind of crisis, which is World War II. So good job, Winston Churchill. You did Britain proud. Okay. So once again, now that France fell, British is left to fight alone. And this really woke up Americans. Americans said this is now real. Okay. Only thing that stands in between the United States and Hitler is the island nation of Britain. So FDR moves quickly. He builds up a huge air fleet. He builds up a navy. He gets a navy ready actually on both sides of the United States in case Japan had any ideas. But it wasn't really we're building up the navy to be an aggressive nation. We're building up the navy in case this didn't work out. Because what would happen if Britain falls to Hitler? Okay. The United States had to be prepared in case Hitler came for us next. So just because we're building up our Navy, building up our Air Force, that doesn't necessarily mean we were willing to jump into this war. It just meant that it got real once France fell. We were one step away from Hitler now. Okay. Yes. Okay, so a couple steps we make to get ready for war. Congress spends about $37 billion building up our Army, our Navy. We see in September of 1940, they pass a conscription law, which is more or less the first peacetime draft we'll see. They train about 1.2 million men and have about 800,000 in reserve. And also there's this question of what to do with colonies in the Western Hemisphere. So we see Denmark fell, France fell, the Netherlands have fallen. So what do we do with French colonies that are are in the Western Hemisphere? What do we do with them? They're kind of orphaned. So just so you know, in 1914, there is the Havana Conference, and more or less, it's trying to answer the question of what to do with these orphaned colonies that are in the Western Hemisphere, and really what we decide, is that, it would be collective security. The Western Hemisphere would work together, that we would kind of take the colonies under our wings, that we would work against any European intervention, kind of mutual defense between the United States and what comes to be 21 different colonies kind of south of the border. All right, Section K, refugees from the Holocaust. So, anti-Semitism or kind of anti-Jewish feeling is definitely present in Germany, and Jews are being persecuted right and left, being attacked by mobs. We're not going to go into the details, but the Jewish community is definitely being persecuted in Germany. So what happens, notably, September 9th, 1939, is called the Night of the Broken Glass, right? Kristallnacht. And what it is 7,000 Jewish-owned stores and practically any synagogue that exists in Germany that night was ransacked, okay? They break the glass, they go in, they steal stuff, they shake things around. Okay, so that's not a wonderful thing, and at least 91 Jewish people are killed. But we're still not really willing to help these Jewish refugees. For example, a lot of the Southern Democrats don't want to have war refugees come to the United States. Also, we have a lot of really strict immigration laws, so that prevents a lot of Jewish immigration. But finally, after reports of this horrible genocide are confirmed in the United States, then FDR formed something called the War Refugee Board. And the War Refugee Board saves thousands of Hungarian Jews from execution. So we allow these Hungarian Jews to come to the United States. And when all was said and done during World War II era, about 150,000 Jewish people immigrate to the United States to seek refuge. But of course, like I said, 6 million Jews will be murdered in the Holocaust. All right, last section. Section L, bolstering Britain. Okay, so now Britain is, standing alone. It seems a bit unwise to stay neutral. Wisdom would dictate that we would help reinforce British troops. So Hitler starts to bomb Britain, okay, air raids, and this is called the Battle of Britain. And what's his name? Hitler's idea is he's going to bomb Britain, and once he gets them good and weak, then he'll invade Britain himself. So we see Britain being bombed constantly. And Americans are sitting in their living rooms, and they're listening to their radios, and they're hearing these horrific stories of all of this destruction that's happening in Britain. So Americans' hearts kind of start to melt a little bit for Britain. We start to have some compassion, but it isn't enough to make us feel like we need to enter the war. And Roosevelt really does have a clear choice. We're going to hunker down in this fortress of America and just get ready to defend America in case Britain was going to fall, or we could actively seek out to help Britain and hope that we could beat Hitler through the aid of Britain. But the isolationists, they're still very strong in America, and the isolationists form a group called the America First Committee. And their famous kind of spokesperson of the American First Committee is Charles Lindbergh, right? He's kind of a household name in America during this time. He was the first solo flight across the Atlantic. And the American First Committee had a valid point. They said we should use our military strength to defend ourselves. What if Britain were to fall? And, what if we helped Britain? And what if Britain fell? And then we were out of resources. And then we're kind of, out of luck when Hitler comes a-calling for us. So there was a group, the American First Committee, that was very vocal. We shouldn't help Britain out. We should just, keep our resources to ourselves if, God forbid, Britain were to fall. Okay, so here's the thing. The British Navy was in desperate need of some destroyers. The German submarines kept attacking British merchants, and the British really were, stuck in a rough spot. They really needed some destroyers. So FDR, on his own accord, he didn't ask Congress, for anything. What he does is in September of 1940, he gives 50 American destroyers to Britain. Okay, and in exchange, Britain gives the United States 8 different strategically placed naval bases across the globe, really. And we'll actually keep those naval bases for about 90 years. But anyway, this was on his own accord. He gives these destroyers, left over more or less, they're older destroyers, from World War I, okay? And like I said, he didn't even ask Congress. It was simply a presidential agreement. Hey, I'll trade you 50 warships for 8 naval bases. And the idea was he didn't want this to be delayed through Congress, and he didn't want this to be shot down in Congress because it was so important that Britain needed these ships. So we're still kind of on the fence. Next video, the last video here, we're going to be talking about some politics. We have, the 38 election, the 1940 election, and then we'll go all the way up to Pearl Harbor. All right.